Welcome to Holistic Kid Show. My name is Zain.
My name's Abdullah.
And my name's Imad.
We are the Holistic Kids, here to educate power us kids from the inside out.
Kids are getting sicker and sicker with not just small sicknesses, but even big sicknesses, like when their body starts to attack themselves, also known as an autoimmune disease. The amount of kids dealing with autoimmune diseases has doubled since 2010.
Why is the body attacking itself? That is not a nice body.
Isn't the body supposed to be keeping us healthy? I think our body just gets confused, and we have an amazing naturopathic doctor who will help us understand autoimmune diseases and its root causes, especially Lyme disease. Dr. Darin Ingles is a licensed naturopathic doctor, author, international speaker, and leading authority on Lyme disease. He is a former Lyme patient who overcame his own 3-year battle with Lyme disease after having failed conventional treatment and became progressively debilitated. Dr. Ingles found that proper diet, lifestyle management, and natural therapies worked with his body to heal instead of against it. He then applied what he learned about diet and lifestyle management to his own patients and found they recovered faster and with less side effects. Dr. Ingles now has treated thousands of patients with chronic illness using his novel approach. Many who have gone on to live healthy, symptom-free lives. Dr. Ingles has been featured on WebMD, MindBodyGreen, and numerous well-known media outlets and podcasts, and is the author of Lyme Solution, a 5-part plan to fight the inflammatory autoimmune response and beat Lyme disease.
Wait, what does Lyme disease have to do with limes?
It's a great question, Zane. Actually, Lyme disease doesn't have anything to do with citrus fruits. Lyme disease is actually named after Lyme, Connecticut. So it's a city in Connecticut. And the first cases of this illness were found back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, in a group of kids that had sort of unknown joint pain. They didn't know what was causing it, and it took them several years to figure it out. But they finally figured out it was this bacteria that was causing the infection. So because of where it was found in Lyme, Connecticut, they started calling it Lyme arthritis. They then learned later on that it wasn't just arthritis and joint pain, it was causing other types of symptoms. So it therefore became Lyme disease. And here we are 40 plus years later, and we still call it Lyme disease.
Welcome today, Dr. Ingles. Thank you for joining us today. How does a neuropathic doctor go from a doctor to a doctor who specializes in Lyme disease?
It's a great question. Well, I got Lyme disease myself. Nothing like getting an illness yourself to educate you very quickly on how to get rid of it. So when I got Lyme disease, I started doing different things for my own health. I tried conventional antibiotics, which actually didn't work at all for me. So then I started kind of coming back to my naturopathic roots, which is really about diet and lifestyle and getting good sleep and using herbs and nutrition. And when I started doing all this, I found that my health actually started to improve. So it took me about 3 years after I initially got sick to get well again. But it was really my own process of going through that I started applying just to patients I was working with. And I noticed that they got better faster. So it's really about looking at the whole person and making sure that, again, they're eating well, they're sleeping well, they're really learning how to take care of themselves so they can overcome the illness.
That's amazing.
Why do you think kids are getting sicker and sicker?
Well, that's a great question, too. If you look in the United States alone, we see a lot of kids who are very unhealthy. And I know your mom has a very different perspective as I do, but, kids just don't eat good food. I think if you look at a lot of your peers, they eat a lot of processed food and junk food. And there's just so many different things in the environment that can make kids sick. But I think food is probably the one thing that's the biggest contributor to kids not feeling well. And so when you see kids that have chronic eczema and asthma, and they get every cold that comes along, a lot of it probably has to do with the kind of things that they're eating. And there's a lot of other environmental factors. I think a lot of your peers probably play video games a lot, and they stay up late, and they do all these things that we know just aren't really good for our mind, our brain, and ultimately that can impact our health. So if we can get kids to really start eating good, healthy, nutritious food, get away from all the junk food and the soda and the popcorn and the candy and things like that, get really good sleep, and probably limit screen time, all of that can really make kids much more resilient and much healthier.
Let's start with the basics. What exactly is autoimmune disease?
So autoimmune disease is when your immune system gets confused, and your immune system is there to protect us, right? So if you get a cold, if you get the flu, it gets ramped up, so it gets rid of those infections before it really hopefully makes us feel bad. But in autoimmune disease, what happens is your immune system, instead of just fighting bacteria and viruses and things like that, it actually starts attacking your own tissue. So it can attack your joints, it can attack your brain, it can attack your skin, it can attack your gut. It can really attack any part of your body. And so autoimmune disease is a very broad name because it can be any number of different symptoms. But it's really this immune confusion where instead of going after the things that are truly foreign to us, it starts attacking our own body.
What is the most common autoimmunity that kids are dealing with today?
Well, I think in kids today, probably the most common thing that I see in my practice is a condition called PANS, PANS, and PANS stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Syndrome. So what happens with this is that when kids get exposed to different microbes, particularly something like strep, which causes strep throat, sometimes it actually affects their brain, and they start getting anxiety. They can get OCD, or what we call obsessive compulsive disorder, which means they just obsess over the same thing over and over. And sometimes people who wash their hands a lot, or they have to repeat the same thing over and over. And then sometimes they'll get things called tics. It's not tick like the little insect that bites you, but a tick, which is TIC versus TICK. And these tics can be vocal, or sometimes they can be what's called motor. So these are kids that will start making noises with their throat. Sometimes they'll get little twitches in their eyes and their face. And this is just related to inflammation in the brain that's caused by exposure, primarily to strep, but sometimes other types of microbes. And even Lyme disease can cause this. And we've seen more and more kids over the last maybe 10 years start to experience these kind of symptoms where literally overnight, a child can be perfectly normal, and then a day later they start getting these tics, they get really anxious, they start having this OCD behavior, and that's kind of a red flag that that's kind of what's affecting them. I also see a lot of kids now that are getting a lot of joint pain. Again, it's very unusual for young, healthy children to complain of joint pain. Your tissue is very resilient, even for kids who are very active, do a lot of sports. We don't usually hear about, knee pain and hip pain or back pain, but we're seeing more and more kids that are developing autoimmune arthritis, often related, again, to some sort of microbe they've been exposed to.
That is terrible.
It is.
Why is the body attacking itself? What could be the causes?
That's a great question. Boy, if you and I could figure that out together, we'd probably win the Nobel Prize in medicine. We don't really know what exactly causes this behavior on the immune system, why there's something in our environment, something in our world that's actually normally part of our world. I think if you look at a lot of microbes out there, a lot of these bacteria, a lot of these viruses are actually here to protect us. They're not here to harm us. But something happens in the immune system that, again, it starts to recognize these things as not being part of our world. And whether that's something that we're exposed to in the environment, is there some sort of chemical we get exposed to that maybe changes how our immune system acts? Maybe we get exposed to certain toxic metals like mercury or lead that can change that. We don't really know for sure. We just do know that the immune system gets confused and starts reacting to these things, again, that should normally be part of our world.
What are the common signs and symptoms that their bodies are attacking them, that show that their bodies are attacking themselves?
It can be really a lot of different symptoms because autoimmune disease can affect any part of your body. I'd say probably the most common thing we see tends to be related to our connective tissue. So these are our joints and our muscles and our tendons. So joint pain is a really common problem. Gastrointestinal problems. So people get a lot of, either they don't go to the bathroom every day or they go too much. Sometimes they get belly pain. Sometimes they get skin reactions. They get rashes that they can't really explain. Sometimes we'll see a lot of neurological symptoms. So these are symptoms that affect the brain. So people complain of headaches. They'll complain that they can't think very well. They can't remember things. They don't sleep very well. They can't remember where they put their car keys, or they'll see someone they haven't seen in a while and they'll forget their name. It takes them a little bit of time to find that. Again, it can really affect any number of different, parts of your body, but those are probably some of the most common things that we see.
So how would parents be able to detect if their child has an autoimmune process going on? What labs should the parents get for their children to look for their root causes?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, there aren't a lot of lab tests for autoimmune disease that necessarily tell us what's going on. There are some very basic lab tests any doctor can run. We can look at what's called an ANA, or anti-nuclear antibody. This is a screening test for a lot of common autoimmune diseases. So this helps screen for things like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, polymyalgia rheumatica, all these very long names that you guys have never heard of, but these are different types of autoimmune diseases. A lot of times when microbes, if these bacteria or viruses are causing autoimmune disease, unfortunately, a lot of these blood tests may look normal. Sometimes we'll see blood tests that measure inflammation in the body. There's a test called C-reactive protein or sedimentation rate. Both of these tests will go up if there's more inflammation in the body. So if we see elements of inflammation in the body and we don't really know why, that can be an indication that there might be an autoimmune process. So sometimes we have to dig a little bit deeper, but there is a limit, unfortunately, to what blood test will show. So when they come back positive and we know, it's great. But sometimes they come back negative, and it doesn't necessarily mean that someone doesn't have an autoimmune disease. So this is what we call a clinical diagnosis. And what that means, it's based on your signs and your symptoms, even if your blood tests are negative. So it's just one of those things that if the tests are positive, we know what's going on. And if they come back negative, sometimes we just have to base that decision on the kind of symptoms you're experiencing.
What are chronic infections? What makes an infection chronic?
That's a great question. I think our immune system is designed that when we get exposed to a virus or bacteria, our immune system says, hey, you don't belong. It gears itself up and it gets rid of the infection, often within a matter of days to weeks. And in some cases, these different bacteria and viruses have figured out ways to hide from our immune system. So instead of the immune system being able to get rid of it right away, it can stay in your body much longer than expected. So, Lyme disease, I think, is a good example of that, because this is a bacteria. And if you get strep throat, sometimes you don't feel well for, a week or so. And sometimes you take an antibiotic and you feel better very quickly. But in the case of Lyme disease, this is a bacteria that is truly a shapeshifter. It can change its shape and basically hide from your immune system. So your immune system's scouring your body, trying to find the Lyme to get rid of it, and it keeps looking, and it can't find it. And if it can't find it, it can't get rid of it. So if you've got a virus or a bacteria that can hide from your immune system, that's where it can go into this phase where it's really more chronic, because your body just can't get rid of it quickly. And the longer that bacteria or virus stays in your body, it can get into different tissues, it can get into your joints, and get into your brain, and get into your gut. And then you start getting all these different symptoms. So, most infections we expect to be a matter of days to weeks. And when we start to see it go on for months to years, that's really where we've kind of crossed that line from being an acute infection versus a chronic infection.
Can chronic infections make us kids sick?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more kids that are having these chronic illnesses. A recent study found that more than 55% of kids living in the United States today have some type of chronic illness. So it could be asthma, it can be diabetes, but we're seeing more and more kids with these, persistent infections or chronic infections. So unfortunately, again, it's become a big problem in the United States, and I think really in any other Western country around the world, where it's a function, again, of people just not eating good food and really taking care of themselves. It sets the stage so that your immune system doesn't function as well as it could. But it can also lead, again, to all these other problems unrelated to infection, like heart disease, like diabetes, like other allergic illnesses and so forth.
So Lyme diseases come from limes where
They don't come from limes. So if they don't come from limes, where do they come from?
So Lyme disease actually comes from ticks. And ticks, if you guys have ever seen these, there's these teeny weeny tiny little insects that can bite you. So if you've ever had a mosquito bite before, it bites you and it leaves this little red bump and it's really, really itchy. Some people have been bitten by an ant where it just tends to hurt. Unfortunately, with tick bites, you don't feel them. Ticks actually have a little bit of what's called an anesthetic in their saliva. So when they bite you, it actually numbs the area. So you don't feel the tick bite. And they're teeny weeny tiny. If you guys have ever seen poppy seeds, they're these little tiny things. Sometimes they'll put on bagels and other foods, but they're super, super small. So even if you had a tick on your skin, it might be very, very hard to see. And so if you get exposed to one of these ticks, if you've been out camping or hiking or biking with your family, these ticks can get on you and they get in your skin and they bite you. And if they have this bacteria in their own blood, once they bite you, because they then exchange their blood with your blood, it passes through the tick into you. And once it gets in your bloodstream, it can start to make you very sick. So most of the people who get Lyme disease do get it from a tick bite. And these ticks that carry Lyme disease tend to be very common if you live in New England, that part of the United States. Where you guys are in Chicago, the central part of the Midwest of the U.S. is also an area where there's a lot of ticks. So Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, and then you can find it elsewhere around the country. Those are probably the two areas of the country we see it most. But it's actually been reported in all 50 states in the United States. It's been reported in almost every continent around the world. So it's really not a problem unique to the United States. It is a problem we're really seeing on a worldwide scale. In fact, the World Health Organization, who's this big, agency that looks over the health around the world, has found that Lyme disease is the fastest growing infectious disease in the world. So it's really becoming something that we're seeing no matter where you live.
Ew.
Ew. So what are the symptoms of Lyme disease?
So Lyme disease actually has over 100 different symptoms associated with it, but the ones that tend to be most common, and again, I had Lyme disease about 18 years ago, and I had all the classic symptoms. So headache is very common. You feel like you just want to rip your head off. It's a pounding, throbbing headache, joint pain, and what we call migratory joint pain. And what that means is that the joint pain changes. One day your right shoulder hurts, the next day it's your left knee, then your right ankle, and then your back hurts. So when you start to see the pain move around your body, that's what we call migratory joint pain. That is very, very specific to Lyme disease. It can also cause what's called neuropathy. And what that means is you get this sensation of numbness or tingling in your hands, your feet, or sometimes other places of your skin. You can get a very high fever. I had 105 fever when I had Lyme disease, so that's actually pretty high. You can get swollen glands. You can get fatigue. You can get, different neurological symptoms like, short-term memory loss and just difficulty with balance and coordination. There's a skin rash that's very, very common to Lyme disease. It's called an erythema migrans rash. And when you look at this rash, if you guys have ever seen a bullseye or a target, it looks exactly like that. So it looks red, clear, and it kind of grows. So this Lyme rash is kind of different because, again, it has this bullseye or target appearance. You guys have been to Target, right? The big store, go shopping at Target. That big sign you see, that's kind of what the rash looks like. It looks like a target. So that's very unique to Lyme disease. And it's a flat rash, and it tends to spread over weeks. So those are some of the more common symptoms. And then again, if it moves into a chronic phase, often we'll see a lot more neurological symptoms. So this neuropathy or numbness and tingling can get worse. People sometimes experience weakness where they have more difficulty walking or holding, things when they're trying to carry it. Sleep problems tend to be very common. So again, there's over 100 symptoms. And so when I hear people that have joint problems, joint pain with neurological symptoms, the combination of those two always makes me very suspicious about Lyme disease.
Can kids get Lyme diseases?
Absolutely. So, these ticks aren't specific to anyone. If you happen to be in the area and you walk past some grass or some shrubs and you happen to rub up against it and that tick's there, it doesn't care what age you are, it'll jump on you because it's looking for a blood meal. That's what they thrive off of. They want somebody else's blood. And so if you're out, hiking, biking, camping, or sometimes, even playing out in your yard, if you've got a lawn and you're out playing with your brothers, it's possible if there's a tick on that lawn, it could get on you and bite you. So it can really affect anyone regardless of age, and kids are prone to it. I think the one thing about kids that's a little bit different is some kids, when they get Lyme disease, their symptoms might look a little bit different. And sometimes we'll see that, they're not doing as well in school. Kids used to be straight A students are now getting, D's and C's, and they just don't seem to remember and focus well. So we won't always see those classic Lyme symptoms in kids. So again, for kids where we start to see performance change academically, where they're really tired, they just, they might be able to get up and do things, but they used to love playing basketball and now they don't want to play at all. That kind of thing can suggest that there may be something like Lyme disease that's causing a problem.
So is there a treatment to Lyme disease?
Absolutely. So from a conventional standpoint, antibiotics are typically used. This is a bacterial infection. So antibiotics actually work against bacterial infections typically. And so if you've been exposed recently, then antibiotics often will help, take care of the infection. If you've been exposed a while ago, antibiotics may or may not be the best treatment. In my practice, because I'm a naturopathic physician by training, we learn a lot about herbs. And I like herbs because they can be very effective at killing Lyme. But herbs do so much more because they also help reduce inflammation. They help boost your immune system. They help make your circulation better so your blood moves through your body more easily. So we got a lot more benefits to herbs than you get with antibiotics that are really just designed to kill the bacteria. But antibiotics can have some bad side effects. To kill the Lyme, sometimes you accidentally kill some of your healthy bacteria that live in your gut and on your skin, and that can create a different kind of problem. And some antibiotics also damage part of your cell that create energy. So if you're someone who's really tired and you're on antibiotics long term, sometimes that will make it harder to get your energy back. So the nice thing about when we use herbs is that they don't really have a bad impact on your normal gut bugs, and they don't damage these mitochondria, these parts of the cell that actually, create energy for you.
So what lifestyle approaches can a child take to improve autoimmune diseases and our immune system?
So, of course, listen to your mom and dad about eating your broccoli and your good, healthy food, which you guys all do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. You get to sleep on time. You get enough sleep because you want to be in bed early, get up early. That's the way our body's designed to sleep. We really do cycle with the sun. So, we want to get to bed early, wake up early, getting good quality sleep. Because when you get to that deep sleep, that's when your body repairs itself. That's when it restores. That's when you get all your energy back. So as much of that sleep as you miss, it's just harder if you've been sick to get well again. And then movement, making sure that you move every day, doing some sort of exercise or activity. And when we talk about movement, it doesn't have to be that you run every day or you get on your bike every day, but you got to move your body as much as you physically can. When you move your body, you help boost your immune system, you move your blood, so it brings all the nutrients and oxygen to the tissue that needs the repair. And mentally, it just makes us feel better, right? So when you get out, I love riding a bike, and just getting out in California in the sunshine and riding a bike feels great. So it's really good for our mental well-being as well.
How does food influence autoimmune disease?
Good question. Well, food is medicine, right? So, food can either work for your body or work against your body. And we know that certain foods out there can be very inflammatory. So if you're eating a lot of junk food and processed food, they tend to create a lot of inflammation in your body. We know things like gluten and dairy. So gluten comes from certain grains like wheat, oats, barley, and rye, and dairy products just tend to be very inflammatory. So when you eat these foods, it's not a function that you're necessarily allergic to the food, but it can be a function that when you eat it, as it breaks down, it triggers a pathway in your body that just creates more inflammation. And we know that inflammation is often the cause of a lot of chronic illness. So again, whether it's because your joints hurt or your belly hurts or your head hurts, that's often a cause of an inflammatory problem. So the more we can reduce inflammation, that's going to be a big help in feeling better. Plus, there are certain foods that are anti-inflammatory. So if you're eating a lot of, good fish and fish oil, if you're eating nuts and seeds, if you're eating a lot of vegetables, all these foods tend to be anti-inflammatory. So the more that you eat of those, it's going to help keep that inflammation under control. And for anyone who's either has an autoimmune problem or who might be at risk of having an autoimmune issue, this is going to greatly help reduce that risk.
Why is gluten bad for immune diseases?
Well, gluten in this country, I have to qualify when I talk about gluten. Gluten in the United States is not the same that if you're eating gluten anywhere else in the world, pretty much. In the United States, we do two things to our wheat. One is we do a thing called hybridization. Hybridization is basically just a way that they manipulate the seed so it has a higher gluten content. And if anyone's ever traveled outside of the United States, bread here in the United States is very squishy, where if you eat it in France or Italy, it's very crunchy and crusty. That has to do with the gluten content. So Americans like really chewy breads, and therefore we increase the gluten content intentionally to appease that palate. The other thing that they do with wheat is they douse it with a chemical called Roundup. Roundup is a very toxic chemical. We now know this for sure. And they use it to help dry the grain because they get more yield of wheat when they harvest their wheat by doing this. So other countries don't hybridize the wheat. They don't use Roundup when they harvest it. So the combination of those two, I think, makes the wheat more problematic for us as Americans here eating it. Because I've traveled to Europe, I've traveled outside the US, and I've had wheat before, and it doesn't bother me at all. And if I eat it here, I feel gas and bloating and tired, and it just makes me feel terrible. And I think a lot of people have that experience. And it probably becomes more pro-inflammatory than it naturally should be. Because again, I think if you look at other cultures around the world, like India, where they consume a lot of wheat, we don't really see the kind of problems there in a population of over 1 billion people that eat this food, where we see here in the US, a lot of people have a problem with wheat. So yeah, unfortunately, the gluten in this country is just so different than what you see in the rest of the world.
What environmental triggers can lead to autoimmune conditions in kids that parents need to be thinking about?
Well, I think the two big things I think of is one is mold. Mold is something that if you've ever been in a home or a school that's had a water leak, these water leaks can sometimes create an environment where certain types of mold grow. And when they grow, they spread these things called mycotoxins. These are literally chemicals that when you breathe them in, they can damage your brain, they can damage your lungs, and they can cause an autoimmune kind of problem. So just being aware that, if you've ever had a leak in your house, a leak in the faucet, a leak in the kitchen, the bathroom, it needs to be, taken care of right away and remediated appropriately so that, you don't get any kind of mold growth. So mold is a big one. And then just being aware of other chemicals that are used in the environment. So whether around the home, if you're spraying for ants or you're using Roundup on your lawn, or even the things we put on our skin or in our hair, it's your shampoo, it's your soap. For women who wear makeup, any of these things that we're putting in and around our bodies can accumulate over time. And if you're someone who genetically is disposed to being sensitive to these type of exposures, if you get enough of it, it can become problematic. We kind of use this concept that, we're all born with a barrel, and some of us have a really big barrel and some of us have a shot glass. And as that barrel overflows, we start to get symptoms. We start to become more inflamed. We become, more autoimmune. And as much as we can take that load off our barrel, again, that reduces our risk of having these inflammatory or autoimmune problems. So, control whatever we can control. So as parents, you want to make sure that you're really looking at what's going in and on your kids. And for you kids, you need to be mindful about, what it is that you put in your body, what you put on your body, and making sure that the kind of things you're being surrounded are safe for you.
You are so inspiring. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Sure. Well, I'd love for people to follow me at DarinInglesND.com. We'd love people to sign up for our newsletter or join us on social media. We're always posting a lot of information about how to stay healthy, how to overcome chronic illness, if that's what you've been dealing with. And we just got a lot of great information to live a happier, healthier life.
That was so empowering. Everyone make sure to follow Dr. Ingles on social media.
When a kid is sick, it is important to find out why us kids are getting sicker and sicker by getting to the root cause of sickness that can lead to improvement of overall health. Everyone's root causes are different. For some kids, it might be their diet, others their unmanaged stress, and for others, it can be environmental toxins or even chronic infections like Lyme disease. So make sure to see a functional medicine or holistic medicine practitioner by starting with the basics. But starting is the basics is point. Avoid foods that increase inflammation, like limit or eliminate sugar, processed foods, artificial foods, junk foods. Avoid food colorings, as these will only weaken the brain and the body, leading to inflammation. Eat a whole foods, unprocessed foods, real foods. We keep things simple and basic and love eating the rainbow. So it's so delicious and colorful. How can you not? It will also optimize our immune system so the body can get rid of things that don't belong. Keep your environment as toxic-free as you can. Limit chemical cleaners, avoid plastics, and use bottle products and products on your bodies. That is as natural as can be. Look out for mold, and that can lead to brain and lung disease and autoimmune conditions. Be aware of what chemicals are being used all around our bodies. Get sunshine every day. Make sure you exercise daily and get out in nature. Even when it's snowing outside, we have a bike inside that we use on snowy days, and we all love to wrestle and play in the snow. Make
sure to sleep on time. Sleep helps our brain work better.
Stress management. Stress can lead to most chronic conditions like ADHD. So incorporate a stress management technique into your daily routine. We love to play outdoors, practice mindfulness, meditation, and prayer. Focus on what you're grateful for. We sing the Thank Grateful song every day.
Wow, Dr. Ingles, that was amazing. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for having me. I enjoyed being on your show.
It's our pleasure.
It's our pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Zayn Sari.
And I'm Abdullah.
And I'm Imad.
Follow my family and I on social media, Holistic Mom MD, and look out for my mom's book, The Holistic RX, and the new children's book we wrote together called Adam's Healing Adventures. So check it out on Amazon. Yay! Remember, our bodies and our health is a huge blessing, and we need to take care of our bodies the best we know how. Please spread the word. Kids need to learn from other kids. Please download our podcast on iTunes and leave a review so other kids and families can watch it too. Can benefit. We need to work together to create a healthier future for all of us. Join us next week for another episode of the Holistic Kid Show, where kids are empowering kids. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.